Imagine feeling like you're standing in the middle of a storm. The wind is swirling, everything is out of control. Hot flashes, sleepless nights, mood swings, it can make anyone feel overwhelmed. But what if there was a simple way to calm the chaos? Most of us think we need complicated fixes to feel better. Medication, strict routines, big lifestyle changes. But today, we're exploring something different, something that's already within you, your breath. This episode is all about using breathwork for menopause. Stay tuned because you're going to learn practical, easy to use tools that can make a real difference for you. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button to get more real insights. Today's guest is Kimberly Faith, a renowned breathwork specialist and transformation coach. Kimberly has spent years working with individuals to help them harness the power of breath to manage stress, anxiety, and to find their inner calm. She's been featured on national radio platforms like iHeartRadio and major stations across the country, sharing her wisdom about using breath as a natural tool for wellness. We're thrilled to have her here today to dive into how breathwork for menopause can truly change the game. Welcome, Kimberly. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Holly. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, good. I know that you have helped people find calm and clarity with breathwork. Was there a particular moment when you realized the unique power of breathwork to help people when they're going through some major life transitions, especially menopause?
Yes, there was a very, very pivotal moment in my life where everything shifted. I actually had never even heard of breathwork before. And I was at a retreat with a coaching group I'm a part of. And we went into this. They were like, we're going to do breathwork. We're going to, and I'm like, I don't know. However, I'm a dive right in kind of person. I don't dip my toe in things. I'm like, all right, I'm going all in. And that's exactly what I did. And it was intense. Breathwork is intense. And I had the most powerful visions. I felt like I was getting clarity. I mean, I cried, I laughed, everything happened. And I came out of that session and I was like, everyone needs to do breath work. And then after that, because that was a kind of like almost like a spring cleaning form of breath work, like a somatic breath work. So from that point, I started reading books on breath work. And I was like, oh, wow, if I learn more about breathing techniques, I can actually help people not just do that stuff, which I eventually went to Spain and got certified for. Yeah, so we can do that. We could do the deep clean, but also coaching and teaching people how to use their breath to regulate their nervous system, to bring calm, like you were saying, in these just in a chaotic life. I mean, life just gets faster and faster and more loud and more chaotic, and there's so much noise and so much stress, especially for people who are entering menopause or are in it. Like, there's a lot going on there emotionally, mentally, and being able to use your breath to bring you back to a place of presence, to bring you back to a place of just like almost like press your reset button. It's been so powerful to be able to teach this to people and for them to see the relief, to see the joy, to see the calmness or the peace that just washes over them once they start to become more aware of their breath.
That has to be a very rewarding experience. For those who might not be familiar with breath work, can you just give us a simple explanation?
Sure. Well, breath work, I think there it's important to identify that there's a distinction between breathing techniques and breath work. Breathing techniques, a lot of people don't know many breathing techniques. So breathing techniques are short things that I can show you we can do here on this program that will help people either if they want to ramp up their energy, I got breath for that, or if they want to calm down, we got breath for that. So those are some breathing techniques that we'll teach. Then there's breath work, which is more like my first experience, where it's called somatic breath work because it's all about getting entirely into your body, entirely out of your mind. Some people think, oh, I'm going to be going into kind of like a sound bath, but with my breath. Wrong. And you've experienced it before. So there's a reason. I tell people this all the time. There's a reason they call it breath work because it's not like, that's the breathing technique side. The breath work is using your breath to take you to altered states of consciousness, to help you release trauma, to help your body heal. Because face it, like we all have traumas all over our body. Our body stores them. Um, there are times that we don't permit ourselves to feel emotions because it's not socially acceptable, or we have to be strong, or we have to be strong for our family or for our job or for our clients or kids or whatever. So it's like, oh, I can't feel that right now. And I push it away. And then that ends up getting trapped into your body. And we do that all the time without even realizing it. So when we start to get into breath work, we're peeling back those onion layers of all those trapped emotions and dislodging that stuck energy, dislodging some of those things that got stuck in our body and letting them go to allow that energy to flow freely, which is such a relief to be able to experience it. But you got to work for it.
Yeah. Yes. Well, exactly. And you're so right about, I think all of us on probably a daily basis are pushing things aside and putting them in little quarters of our mind or wherever you want to hold that in your body. And not a good idea.
No. Do you know, I actually read this book. It was a breathwork book. And there was a neurologist who did a study on herself. She was going through some health stuff. And so she was studying emotions and trapping things in your body and not feeling them because you have to be strong or for whatever reason. And she said what she concluded in her studies after studying this for many years is that if you actually give permission to that emotion, whatever's coming up, whether it's anger or upsetment, you want to cry, you want to scream, whatever, um, if you give permission to let that move through you and actually feel it, scientifically, the emotion only lasts 90 seconds. However, when we trap it and then we get all like worked up and then we forget to breathe and we're breathing right here, we hold our breath and whatever, and then you have to do a breath work session to let it all out. It's like, oh, it could have been so much easier
Right?
had I,
So
had
much
I,
easier.
yeah, had I just let myself feel what I was feeling at that moment. It would have only been 90 seconds.
You've been doing this for a little bit of time, right? Has there ever been a transformation that you've witnessed that has really stuck with you?
Whoa. So many. My favorite part of any breathwork class is the end when people get to share. I've had, I mean, we can tap onto any category. I had one person at a retreat of mine, who wasn't really, she didn't really want to do the breath work, but she was at my house at a retreat. So, I mean, she really didn't have a choice. So she went into it. She was kind of like, now back up. She had severe plantar fasciitis. So she was just hobbling around my house all weekend, a lot of pain. Um, and she did the breath work, grudgingly, but she did it. And she came out of it. She goes, I can't believe this. This is the first time in years I haven't felt pain. The next morning she found me and she was walking fine. So sometimes I see a lot of physical healing. That's just one story. There are some stories emotionally. My sister is a great example. My niece fought cancer for 6 years before she passed. And there was one point that she was in remission. But my sister, her mom, my niece's mom, had a lot of PTSD and a lot of pain because her life was in hospitals fighting cancer or chemo, surgeries, this whole thing. So I told her, I convinced her, I said, please let me do some breath work with you. And so she did it and she was just tears just streaming down her face. And she said, this is the first time in years I've never felt any pain. And I just don't want to leave this space. I feel so at peace. So that it definitely is memorable. I've had a lot of people talk about visions of either visions of their future self, visions of things they know they should step into. I had one woman who had just finished menopause, and she's a Jewish woman, and she did breath work and she came out of it, and she said, going into this, growing up, they always called me a little Jewish girl, and that was the identity through which the lens through which I lived life, and I wasn't bold and didn't speak up because it was a little Jewish girl. And she said, after this breath work, I realized that I'm not a little Jewish girl. I'm a strong Jewish woman. So her whole almost identity shifted.
Yes,
So, I
that's a
mean,
big transformation.
huge, huge, huge. So, I mean, I've got 100, we could talk all day about the stories and it's amazing. There's one guy I breathed 2 weeks ago. He's in recovery. He used to be an addict. And for years prior, he'd done lots and lots and lots of drugs. He said lots of psychedelics and whatever. And he said on the hundreds of trips he's had, maybe 5 stand out in his mind. He said, doing breath work is that experience. He said, top 5 experiences in my life. He said, I felt so open, my mind open, my heart open, relaxed. He said, it's crazy. He wasn't expecting it.
Right, right. Why do you think, you mentioned like an initial reaction from someone when you're speaking to them, and you're like, let's try this. Why do
Yeah.
you think, like that woman in your house where she's like, "Ugh, that's like the last thing that they want to do. Why do you
Yeah.
think that is? What's that barrier? And
Hesitation. Yeah. That's a really, really good question. I think for some, they may think it's just often woo-woo world, like it's just my
Mhm.
breath. How powerful can my breath really be? So that I'm sure is part of it. For some, they may have heard stories like, oh, breath work, Rick, it can get intense. Some people may not want to put in the work. And part of doing the work, capital T, capital W, sometimes means doing the work physically.
Yeah.
And in my case, breath. So some people, and I think that there's a lot of newbies I get in classes, which I love newbies. They're some of my favorite people to breathe. Um, there's a lot of fear there. Like, can I do it? Can I do this? Am I doing this right? And I like to remind people over and over, it's just your breath. You've been doing it your whole life and you have 100% batting average. You're doing awesome.
Mhm.
Just keep breathing. Just keep breathing.
But we're always searching for that perfection. Like you said, am I doing this right? Why does it have to be right? It's how you're doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And if I want people to breathe harder, like, I'll encourage them, hey, take a deeper breath. It's easy. You're doing fine. You're doing perfect. So that's why, like, whether I'm breathing someone one on one or whether we're in a class or it's virtual, doesn't matter the setting. I really try and be your biggest cheerleader so that you can surrender even more. Because the more you can surrender to your breath, the deeper you can go and the more powerful of an experience you can have.
What's your way of encouraging people to explore breath work and have it as a tool that they could kind of keep in their back pocket? Because I think a lot of women and men too don't think of breath work. That's not the first thing on their list. Right
Sure.
away, I feel we go, you run to your doctor, you get a prescription, you talk about all these things that are going on in your life. Instead of, maybe just being present in the moment and saying, I think I have something else.
I encourage them to start simple, especially if there's fear there. Start with something as simple like a breath technique. Something just to see, like say, you're mad about something or scared about something. The simplest thing I like to teach people is called a box breath. I don't know if you've ever heard of it
Yes.
before. And for your audience, if you haven't heard of box breath, it's very simple. You start with like breathing in through your nose for a count of 4, and then you hold it for a count of 4. And then you exhale out of your mouth for a count of 4. And then you hold it for a count of 4 again. And what that does is it sends a signal to the brain, the rest, restore, digest. It sends a signal to the brain that you're okay and everything's safe. And if you do that a few times, you feel like your parasympathetic nervous system takes over. The fight or flight goes away. And all of a sudden, things seem a little clearer. And that's very simple. So if people can just engage the breath with trying just a little thing, you
Yeah.
don't even need a coach for that.
Mhm.
You can do that on your own. Start there. Just so that it doesn't have to be that scary. Again, it's just your breath. So try that or try just making your inhales longer than your exhales. And doing that, I always encourage people to breathe in through their nose, out through their mouth, because your nose, the filtration system in your nose, it's powerful. It creates 11 times by breathing through your nose, 11 times more nitric oxide than any antioxidant out there. And so many people breathe through their mouth. There's a lot of mouth breathers.
I would have thought it
Yeah.
would have been the opposite.
Yeah, there's a book called Breath by James Nestor. It's my favorite
Oh,
book.
I have that. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
it's my
Mhm.
favorite book on breath work. I really enjoy it. He went through a study at Harvard, I think. Anyway, some study that for 3 weeks, what they did is basically they taped up his nose. They checked all his levels, his health levels, and they taped up his nose, and he had to do everything for the next couple of weeks, breathing out of his mouth, including like his workouts and stuff like that. It all had to be mouth breathing. At the end of the 3 weeks, 21 days, all of his health numbers had dropped, all of them. And he was feeling ill. He was feeling unwell. He was feeling lethargic. Yeah. So then they switched it and they checked all his numbers again. I think they let him regulate. Then they put tape over his mouth, and you can actually do these tests and buy like medical tape. So he was forced to breathe out of his nose, obviously not when he's eating.
Mhm.
out of his nose for the next 3 weeks. They checked his numbers within days. All of his numbers shot straight up. Straight up. So there are people who, especially when you sleep, there's a lot of mouth breathers when you sleep. There are a lot of people that sleep with tape over their mouth if you want to improve your health. It sounds scary, and some people are want to like tiptoe into that either. They don't want to necessarily straight away sleep with tape on their mouth.
Right.
However, it's really like if you could even do it for, a half an hour or practice what it feels like for 20 minutes to put a piece of tape over your mouth, like medical tape that's not going to rip hair off your face or anything like that. You don't want it to be painful. And practice breathing through your nose. It's actually really good for you. And eventually you get used to it. It's so healthy for you.
Yeah, that's very interesting because you can even do that during the day to just kind of get used to that feeling.
100%. If you're working at your computer or writing emails, put some tape over your mouth. See how it feels to only breathe out of your nose. You will significantly improve your health.
And maybe you could put it also on people in your house so that they're not speaking to you during the day. But
That sounds like a brilliant. I'm just going to go to my husband and put tape on his mouth and be like, be done. That's hilarious.
Your breath work. Don't worry about it.
That is hilarious.
I think a lot of women can feel like they're struggling with their emotions and feeling out of control and a lot of unpredictability, during menopause, but also kind of during midlife, because we have a lot of things coming at us. Can you, maybe explain how breath work can really help them bring back a sense of control and calm and maybe being more present in the moment?
Yeah. I think, and this is just my personal opinion, I think in order to get there, sometimes you have to knock down some stuff, some junk that's in the way, which is why I think having a bit of a breathwork practice helps, because sometimes, yes, we want to get to a place of grace and ease and cool, calm, collected and feel really good. But there may be some junk in the way that we have to clear out energetically first. So I think doing breath work, even if you were to do it for, not everything has to be these big sessions that I do. Doing breath work for me, 10 to 15 minutes a day, sometimes it dislodges some tears that just needed to come out, or some anger, or sometimes like in my breathwork classes, people think they're like, oh, am I doing something weird? There's nothing I haven't seen. I've breathed over 1,000. People punch and they kick and they get on all fours and they like roar and they scream and they stomp. Sometimes that needs to come out. Now, that usually doesn't happen if you're doing it for 10 minutes. However, there are some emotions that could come up. And I think, like we were talking about earlier, if you do breath work for 10, 15 minutes, you may have some cries come up. And the key is, don't worry about the why. The reality is, why does the why matter? All you need to know is that emotion, that whatever was inside of you needed to come out. Because typically, if we allow ourselves to be angry, to cry, to feel whatever, how do we feel after? We're kind of like, oh, man, almost like it was cleansing. So I think in order to reach that more calm state, sometimes you got to put in a little you got to put in a little work to get there.
I don't think typically we let ourselves have those feels.
Yeah. So I think for all the women listening there, if you can add an additional 15 minutes to your morning routine or your evening routine, because let's face it, I'm a morning person, so I'd rather put it into my morning. Some people may rather do this kind of stuff at night, or just plug in 15 more minutes and give yourself just space to feel via accessing it through your breath. And even sometimes it's hard. I know for me, I'll speak for myself. Sometimes it's hard for me to access my emotions because there's so much going on. It's like, no, I gotta, I want to cry, but I can't cry now. By taking some time, and then when I actually have time to cry, I can't access the tears. So like for me, I'm like, man, I can't cry. I have all these feelings that I don't know how to access. Breathwork is a beautiful way to access those feelings.
I am a crier. I think I could be a professional crier at times.
I wish I had more of you.
But, you do have to learn. You can't do that out in public. You can't do that at the grocery store and at work. And you need to be able to, calm yourself in those situations. But it's hard then not being able to access that later on because it's going to get stuck somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. And then that's when you get violent in a breathwork class, which is great. Like, Every time my husband does breath work, he gets violent. Like, because we have decades upon decades of wounds and things we've trapped that'll take a lifetime to dislodge, you know? So you just got to keep coming back and keep doing the work. And every time you do it, you feel a little lighter and a little freer. And it's like, oh, wow, I feel a little bit more like myself right now.
The way you work with someone, is it on
Mhm,
an individual basis or is it part of a group class?
mhm.
And if it's as a group, is there a different experience? Do people kind of feed off one another
Feed
or
off each
feel
other.
a little more connected as a group?
Mhm. Yes. Great questions. You have really, really great questions, by the
Oh,
way.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
Very curious about this topic, and
oh,
and I
well,
just think
thanks.
it's such a wonderful tool, and I'm so glad that we were able to connect because I think it's undervalued.
Hugely. People look at their breath. I feel like it's undervalued and underappreciated. It's just like, oh, it's my breath. It's always there to serve me. How often do we take time to actually like almost have gratitude for our breath? Because if we didn't have breath, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. You would cease
Right,
to exist.
exactly.
And when you're more intentional with the breath by doing a class or by doing some breathing techniques, you're activating the medicine and you're learning that your breath is actually medicine. It is medicine for your soul, medicine for your mind, medicine for your body, medicine for your spirit. It is medicine. Trust me. But what was the question you had again? You're really good.
Oh,
Yes,
but
virtual working
individual or as a
individually.
group?
Yep. Um, I mean, I do individuals. There are people, I do a lot of privates. Um, I enjoy the group setting more, especially in person. So I do privates and groups both virtually and in person. Um, Everyone works differently. It's kind of like speakers. There are some speaker slash coaches that prefer the one-on-one, and some speakers that want to speak to the masses. It's just their
Yeah,
makeup.
right.
I tend to prefer group settings, specifically in-person group settings, because you definitely feel the energy. And if one person starts screaming in this side of the room, a lot of times it runs like a wave. It almost gives permission to other people, so you'll hear like you'll like hear ah, and then another person next to him will get louder, another person, and before you know it, the entire room is just screaming and like. So I find even though people have blindfolds on and they can't see each other, the energy spreads like a wave. And then you'll have people laughing. You'll get the giggle corner, and then the giggle corner will erupt like a wave. And like I had one class, it was crazy because people are laying down. They've got eye masks on. So it's a very safe space. If you were to pass out, good, you're laying down. It's never happened, but
Yeah,
you're
good.
in a good place. Um, and one person got up, it was a very empowering session. And one person got on their knees and then they stood up and started stomping. And I was thinking, oh, wow, they have a blindfold on and they're standing. Wow. Like, this is like, keep breathing, but I got to watch the safety of this, right? Then another person across the room stands up. Then another. No one could see each other. It was crazy. And it's a group that I breathe often. It's a group that I breathe twice a year. It's an amazing group. Um, and before you know it, the entire room was like stomping and standing. And I was like, what? This is crazy. It was crazy. Yeah. So I definitely like in-person group settings because people feed off each other without even realizing they're doing it.
Why eye masks in the class?
Because you want to, and like with virtually, I encourage people to wear headphones too.
Uh-huh.
I have an additional breathwork certification called 9D that brings in headphones
Okay.
too. I won't get into all of that, but the more you can strip away any other sense, your vision, external, like if I was doing breath work right now, I would definitely put headphones on and an eye mask. Because if I didn't have that, like if my husband comes in and he's talking, or if the dog goes and barks, you get distracting and then you're taking out of the experience. The more you can strip away any stimuli, same thing with comfort levels. Like I tell people to bring a blanket, bring a pillow, because when you do breath work, your body temperature fluctuates. You get hot, you get cold, you get hot, you get cold. Ladies, you know what I'm talking about. So being able to just like when you get cold, quick pull the blanket on, or when you get hot, throw it off. Like you
Yes.
don't want, because if you're hot or cold, it will take you out of the experience because your mind is going to be focusing on, I'm so cold, I'm so cold. So you're not going to be able to enjoy the breath work, or I'm so hot, I'm so hot. Same thing with having to pee. Before I start any session, I'm like, okay, go, like I'll go through my intro and it's like, okay, go pee.
Because it's any one little thing can take you out of
Take
the
you out of the
yeah,
experience.
right.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think sometimes we feel overwhelmed by advice, right? Everybody's got a solution to something, or we should be trying to do this. How can we help women feel that breath work it just isn't another thing to take off their to-do list? Like it's actually something that is really going to help them feel less stressed and more in control and not
Yeah.
another thing to have to do.
Sure. Another thing on your to-do list,
Yes.
right? I think what I would encourage people is you can do it anywhere. If you're in the car waiting at a red light and you're having a chaotic day, or if you're just having a moment, in for 4, out for 8. Just and don't put pressure on yourself. You don't have to do all these, I mean, yeah, I encourage bringing some of it into your morning routine or evening. But if you don't have time for that, you don't have time for that. Don't put pressure on yourself to add another thing. If it doesn't work for you, if it's not aligned, that's okay. You could do some breathing exercises at the red light. You could do some breathing exercises where the person in front of you at the grocery store has a full cart. You're like, "Ugh." Activate the breath there and just kind of like, you don't have to close your eyes and get all weird and like have people stare at you. You can you can just
You
bring your
can, but
awareness. Yeah, you can if you want. I mean, it's something I would do, but you can if you want. But if you just simply turn your awareness into your breath and just like easy and then just place your focus and your awareness on your breath,
Mhm.
it will bring calm to you. It will.
I know that besides during the day, the
Mhm.
best for me anyway, the point in my day where I'm most intentional about my breath is when I'm getting ready to go to bed. And you're in a nice comfortable bed and you're trying to shut the mind off so that
Mhm.
we can actually go to sleep. Is that a
Yeah.
good place to practice breath work?
Oh,
And you have a
absolutely.
suggestion about how to
Mhm.
kind of shut the racing thoughts?
Yeah, yeah, there's a breath called the 4-7-8 breath, which these breaths are on my website and there's videos where I demo it, so we
Oh,
can
good. Okay.
put that in for yeah. Where 4-7-8, so you breathe in for a count of 4, remember through the nose,
Hmm.
and then you hold for a count of 7, so it's a little bit longer, and then you exhale for a count of 8 through the mouth. And what that does is it actually helps prepare the mind and prepare the body for sleep. And
Oh,
people fall asleep a lot quicker by using the 4-7-8 breath.
oh, I like that. I'm going to be
Mhm.
practicing that this evening.
Mhm. 4, 7,
Um,
8.
yeah, force, I could,
Mhm.
you could remember that. Like that's not
Yeah,
that.
not that bad.
Right. And I know that there are simple practices that we could integrate into our daily life. And like you said, in the car, before we go to bed at night, before we wrap up now, are there any other suggestions about how to incorporate this into your daily life?
Sure, sure. So we talked a lot about regulating the nervous system and bringing you down. However, there are some situations that call for getting ramped up, that you need to build energy. You need to, you know, so what I recommend there is just it's a rapid breath in and out the nose. Think of a bull when it's like harnessed in, right before it starts bucking. How does it breathe to increase that energy? So that's what I do. Like before I hop on to calls and before I get on something, like I really want to clear my mind and get into a place where I feel energized. I use that nose breath. So that really helps amp up the energy. Another breath, and I know I'm like hitting you with a lot of breaths. There is a free downloadable on my website as well with a lot of this, but alternate nostril breathing, which is another simple one. This helps with focus and clarity because it activates both hemispheres of the brain. I'm sure you've seen yeah, so
Yes, right. I've
you'll
done it
like
before, and it takes a little bit of practice.
it does it is I would say of like the breathing techniques is probably like the trickiest of them. But stick with it. And
Yes.
you don't have to when you do these breathing techniques, you don't have to do them for 5 minutes. You don't even have to do them for 3. If you do them for a minute or 2, that's good enough. Just enough to kind of like recenter you.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
to recenter you. So if you cover your a nostril and then take a breath in and then plug that nostril and breathe out the other nostril.
Yes.
Breathe in, plug it. So you're right. That one is a little bit more tricky, but
Yes.
it is helpful in helping the brain since it is both using both hemispheres of the brain.
Right. And sometimes you just have to change that focus. You know, we get so caught up in the day and everything that's going on that there are even moments where I think sometimes I feel like I forget to breathe. Like you get so
Happens. I have people in my classes all the time and they always feel very embarrassed to tell me this. And I don't want anyone to ever feel embarrassed because it happens to me too. Like just because I'm a breath worker doesn't mean I'm not human. Like I
right.
have moments that like in stress or anger or fear or whatever that you realize and people tell me all the time they're like I forget to breathe. You realize that you've been like just holding your breath and you're like when's the last time I exhaled? There's that. Or people a lot of times I have people do an exercise where they put a hand on their tummy and a hand on their chest and they'll take a breath in through their nose and exhale and do that a few times, not any particular count. And I ask them what rises first? Is it your chest or is it your tummy? Because in this chaotic world where we're so stressed and tired and all the things, we tend to breathe here. People who I find are very stressed, there's a lot of tension, a lot of stress in their life. They breathe in and out of their chest, which is not great. It's not great for the health. You want to be breathing from your diaphragm. There's a lot of stuck, trapped oxygen, stale oxygen that gets stuck in the diaphragm. So the more you can just become breath aware and remember, like, oh, I'm breathing here or I'm not breathing at all, bring it, let it come through your tummy first, then rise to your chest,
Okay.
then to your throat and exhale.
I mean, that does make a lot of sense. But yeah,
Mhm.
sometimes we take shortcuts even when we're breathing, right?
100%. We take shortcuts because it feels easier.
Yes.
And to take long, slow breaths through the diaphragm, it does take some awareness. It does
Mhm.
take some effort because sometimes you're taking a nice, like, slow inhale in and then you exhale really slowly. Sometimes you almost get panicky because you feel almost air hunger.
Yep.
Like, oh,
Yes.
I want to gasp. I want to take another inhale. And it's like, no, 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 you're good. You're good. Just calm it
Right.
down. The people on the animals in the animal kingdom that live the longest are the ones that breathe the slowest. Whales breathe really slow and they can hold their breath for a long time. They live like the longest. There's also a naked mole rat, which if you were to Google it, it's like they kind of look like those like naked cats, those
Oh,
hairless
yeah, yeah.
cats.
Okay.
It kind of looks a little bit like that. Um, and these naked mole rats, like a mole or these rats generally live like a year or two, whatever their lifespan is. These naked mole rats, they can hold their breath long and they breathe so slowly. They live up to 30 years.
Oh, good God.
Yeah. So the more you can, like the average person, I think, and don't quote me on these numbers, but I think breathes like 10 breaths a minute. The more you can slow down your breath, like if you're the average person say it's 10, a yogi will be at like 5 breaths a minute. So that's really slow breathing. That's like almost 5 to 6 seconds in, 5 to 6 seconds out. And you know how they live long, they live strong, they live healthy. Start small. If you just become aware first, like, oh, well, I'm breathing in for a count of two and out for a count of two. Just figure out what your baseline is. Like, oh, I breathe really, really fast. Then try and extend it by a second and extend it by a second. And the more you can prolong your breath, the more you will prolong your life. Period.
Those are words of wisdom.
I hope so.
Well, you have certainly given us a lot to think about today. And I really enjoyed this conversation. And I think it could be just one of those things that breathing, you take for granted, but that can
Yeah.
actually be a really important part of your day. If we want to
Yeah.
learn more about breathwork and more about what you do, where can we find you?
Really simple. My website is thebreathworkgirl.com. I was so excited when I got that domain. Thebreathworkgirl.com. On there, you'll find some videos of me demonstrating some breathing techniques. You'll have a downloadable of a couple breathing techniques. So you'll find some stuff on there as well. I mean, it doesn't have all the things I offer, like retreats and whatever, but you'll find the breathwork stuff there.
And do you have anything exciting coming up or any different type of courses or things that you're
Yeah.
working on right now?
Actually, yes, I do have something very exciting that I'm super excited about. I went to Bali this past summer and it changed my life. So I and every person I talked to, specifically women, they're like, "Oh, that's on my bucket list. I want to go to Bali." So, and I do retreats. I'm a breath worker, and I host probably 6 or 7 retreats a year, a lot. So retreating is kind of like my thing.
Okay.
So I am taking a group of up to 15, 20 women to Bali next June. So we'll be doing a lot of breath work. We're going to be doing in-room massages. We're going to be doing personal growth stuff, adventure, all the fit luxury, lots of luxury. So if anyone's interested and if it's on your bucket list, and you want to make that dream come true, there we could talk about that. You could find me via my website, or that website is baliblissbreakthrough.com. And for your audience, I'd like to offer them an additional $250 discount if they're interested in jumping on board and going to one of the most magical places on earth.
I was just going to say, you probably couldn't have picked a prettier spot in the world to host something like that. And thank you for that. Yeah, I hope
Mhm.
somebody in the audience takes advantage of that, and
Yeah.
sounds like an amazing experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I love to create magical experiences for people. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Thank you again so much. And this has just been such a wonderful conversation. And
Mm.
you are so passionate and you have so much enthusiasm that it's contagious. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you. And I hope everyone got something out of it that they can apply right away and you feel good inside.
Thank you for joining us on Real Insights. If you want to hear more about how other women manage menopause symptoms naturally, order your copy of Empart, Real Stories, Real Wisdom, Real Menopause on Amazon today. And don't forget to join the conversation at joinempart.com. Until next time, remember that menopause is a journey, but you're not alone.